Hello everyone. In my previous video, I introduced a method for combining textures, mainly focusing on the principle of texture combination. That method is still usable if there aren't many textures to combine. However, when you're dealing with many models and textures, the situation can become quite complicated. Next, I will introduce an add-in that can quickly tackle the problem of combining textures in complex scenes. Take a look at the scene. There are many models, materials, and textures. I will show you how to use this add-in. First, you need to install this add-in called Simple Bake. I'll put the link to this add-in in the video description. Once you've installed it, it will appear here. It has many options. I will explain them to you one by one later. Select all the models and combine them with Ctrl+J to meet the first requirement. This add-in has two tabs. The first is PBR Bake. If the model you need to merge is for real-time rendering, like in a game, you can use this process to bake. If you want to merge a specific type of texture, you can use Simple Bake. The differences are not significant. I'll demonstrate with Simple Bake, and at the end of the video, I'll use PBR Bake to showcase a small case. Setting presets are used to save baking workflows. You can save your baking settings inside. Bake object can add the selected models, and the add-in will only bake the added model. Simple Bake allows you to select the type of texture to be baked. It's important to note that you first need to determine the display mode of the texture. Open the material editor, check the shader, and you'll find that the scene mainly uses emission to present. Further confirm in render pass, select diffuse and find that this render pass is black because there is no diffuse data in the shader. Switch to emission and you'll get the corresponding render pass. So the type of texture to bake should also be emission. Below is an option for denoising. The default settings are fine. Special Bake can bake some non-texture data onto the texture, such as color ID, vertex color, and so on, so you can choose according to your needs. Texture setting refers to the size of the combined texture. Here, I set it to 4K. Margin type refers to how the baked texture expands on the UV. I find that extend is better to use. Here, it allows 2 pixels to extend outside the UV. Multiple objects to one texture set, as it literally means bakes multiple models onto one texture. Since my model has been combined, it doesn't matter whether it's checked or not. In export setting, you can choose whether to export the model and texture. I won't export it here. In UV setting, the only thing that needs to be checked is this. It means that this add-in will select the UV named Simple Bake for baking. So I should add a UV named Simple Bake to the model. Enter the data panel. Delete the extra unused UV. Create a UV and name it Simple Bake. See what the original UV looks like? Because it has a lot of materials, its UV can overlap. Therefore, a single baked texture's UV can't have overlaps. Select the UV of Simple Bake and expand all UVs. You can directly use unwrap, but if your model is very complex, the unwrapping will be slow. Here, I use an add-in called UVpackmaster to expand the UV. This add-in can use the GPU to calculate UV, and both the effects and speed are quite good. Click Pack, and you'll see the bottom display is already using the GPU to expand UV. Okay, after about a minute, the UV is processed. Back to Simple Bake, UV setting is done like this. Other setting, just change CPU Bake to GPU Bake, which will make the baking speed very fast. The last 2 options are for the foreground or background baking process. As my model is not extensive, I choose foreground baking. Finally, click Bake and the baking starts. If you also see a similar interface, it means that the baking is going on normally. It's best not to operate Blender anymore to avoid any accidents. There is a progress bar below. Its baking speed is quite fast. When this dialog box pops up, it means that the baking is completed. You can see that the combined textures are already displayed on the left side. Next, it's time to process the original model. First, delete the original UV and also delete the extra materials. Since there are many materials and textures, they can be deleted in the Blender file. Delete other textures and keep the combined texture. Delete all material balls. After deleting material ball, material slot will still be retained. Create a new slot. The model enters edit mode, selects all faces, and assigns all faces to the newly created slot. Back to object mode, click on this small triangle. Remove unused slots. The other useless slots can be deleted. Add a material to this slot, select shader. I will use a shortcut Ctrl+T to automatically add textures to this shader. To use this shortcut, you need to enable the Node Wrangler add-in built into Blender. Select the combined texture. Remember, our current render pass is emission. So connect the texture to emission as well. Okay, it's done. Let's look at its UV and texture. Now, the model only has one material and one texture. Zoom in and see the detail. The combined texture looks quite good. This is the process of combining multiple textures with this add-in. Next, I'll demonstrate the usage of PBR Bake with a small example. This is the model I found on Sketchfab. There are 3 characters. Each character consists of 2 parts. I will explain with the character in the middle. Ctrl+J to merge, according to the requirements of the add-in. Create a UV named Simple Bake. Simply unwrap this UV. Go straight into Simple Bake. No need to set presets. Add this model. In the PBR Bakes panel, here are some texture types that are PBR supported. Enter Material Editor to check the shader of this character. The Principles BSDF shader corresponds to this one. You can choose the required textures for baking according to your project. I will use the Unity engine as an example here. Baking textures suitable for Unity HD RP pipeline. I open Substance Painter. You can see what textures the Unity HD RP render pipeline metallic standard shader requires. A separate diffuse with alpha. Metallic, ambient occlusion, and glossiness are packed together in the form of a PNG image in this channel distribution. A separate normal and emission. So I choose the required textures according to Unity's requirements. If your model's texture has alpha, you need to choose alpha too. Because there is no emission effect on this character, no need to choose emission. Choose the glossy required by Unity here. The one below normal is selected based on the graphics API. If you are familiar with real-time rendering, you should know which one you need. I won't explain too much here. Open Ambient Occlusion under Special Bakes. The texture I set as 2K, the UV edge is extended by 2 pixels. I will export the texture this time. First, you need to save the current Blender file to open the save settings. This add-in will create a folder with this name in the directory where the saved Blender file is stored to store the baked textures. Just use the UV name Simple Bake created, choose GPU for baking. Channel pack is the focus of this process. Because the diffuse baked by this add-in does not have alpha, we need to merge the diffuse and alpha textures. Change the name to be easy for you to recognize. I named it diffuse with alpha here. The image format chooses PNG required by Unity. So the RGB channel is diffuse. The channel chooses Alpha, click Add New, a preset will be created. Another texture unique to Unity will also be needed. Set according to the channel distribution just seen in Substance Painter. The R channel is metallic. The G channel is ambient occlusion. The B channel is empty, and the A channel is glossiness. Click Add New. During baking, this add-in will perform these two packaging operations. All settings have done. Click Bake. You can see the previously selected textures in the 3D view. Okay. All the textures are baked. I opened the folder created by the add-in. All textures are here. Bake Diffuse does not have alpha. Copy this name. Let's replace it with the packed texture. This is a unique texture required by Unity. Next, apply these textures to the model. Delete the original UV and all materials. If you already have this add-in installed, choose the Principles BSDF shader. Ctrl+Shift+T to open the textures to be linked. We need diffuse, metallic, glossiness, normal. These are not required. Click Principles BSDF Setup. You can see that the texture is automatically connected to Principles BSDF. Because Principles BSDF uses roughness texture, glossiness to roughness is color reversal. You can see that normal is a bit too strong. I weaken it a bit. Look here, the armor of the character is with alpha. I need to link Diffuse's alpha to Principles BSDF's alpha. Also, in the settings of the Principles BSDF shader, change the blend mode to alpha clip. Okay, the texture's alpha is working. This is the process of PBR Bake. This add-in is very useful for professionals in the gaming industry. That's all the content of this video. I hope it helps you. Thank you. See you next time.